Is a G5, like a premier group of 5 football conference, is that really advantageous for access to the college football playoff? What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode on the College Underdogs YouTube channel. I'm your host, Trey Smith. We are the one-spot stop, say that 5 times fast, for the underdogs of college football, the mid-majors, the group of 5, whatever you want to call it. If your team is in that group, you need to like and subscribe to this channel because we bring you all the action. And today, I'm going to revisit a topic that I talked about last week, just with a little bit more research, a little bit more information, some financials, so that you can clearly see what the options are right now as it pertains to the PAC-2. All right? Before I get into it, you know what to do. Like this video right now. Subscribe to this channel if you are not a subscriber. I promise you, you will not be disappointed. And I always appreciate it if you'll comment at the end and share it with a friend. Send it to somebody you know who's following this stuff, who's a fan of these teams, or who may enjoy the research that I'm going to be presenting to you in this particular video. So let's jump right in. Last Thursday, I talked about what were the PAC-2's options at this point, right? And I talked about, obviously, a P4 invite could potentially still come in, but we need to keep an eye on the ACC. I didn't feel like the Big 12 was really still in play. But that was option number 1. Not option number 1 as in it's the most likely option, but option number 1 as in what does the team, the school, the university, and the fan bases want. Okay, option number 2 was building a best of the rest conference. And what I talked about last Thursday was how difficult that would be if you were going to look to poach from the American Conference or even Sun Belt Conference USA. Anyone on that Atlantic coast or in the South, how financially that might not make the most sense for them to make that move. But obviously, the first place they're going to look to poach from is the Mountain West. And then I think I talked about a reverse merger and then another option, whether that's relegation or whatever. Well, as I was either recording that video, posting it, premiering it, whatever, at some point on Thursday, while I was in my production process, John Canzano put this tweet up, and I'm going to show you here on the screen. He released a report where he said, expect the Pac-12 rebuild strategy to stay lean. Scott Barnes, the athletic director at Oregon State, told me months ago, 8 is the right number. It keeps you nimble. And then he put the report in there. I think somebody mentioned to me in the comments, either on the video from Thursday or one prior to that, it had to have been Thursday because that's when he put this out. So someone had referenced this. I haven't read this whole report. I'm not subscribed to that site, but if you want to go read it and look into it, feel free. All the information that I'm about to share with you on this video, I have sourced from 5 or 6 different articles from the Sports Business Journal all the way to Nevada Sports Network. Okay, so I will have all the links to everything that I'm sourcing today down in the description below. This particular article from that tweet I just put up is not one of them. However, him putting that report out, it sort of brought this discussion back to the forefront of what's the PAC going to do? Are they going to merge? Are they going to get an invite? Or are they going to rebuild? Everything you hear is that they are committed to rebuilding the conference. So I got curious. I wanted to really dive into what those finances would look like, what the cost of that would look like, other than just what I was saying on Thursday of last week, referring to the American Conference teams. Last week, I was just talking about how that would be, it wouldn't make sense for teams like Memphis, USF, UTSA, Tulane to join a conference on the other side of the country that really would still be considered a G5 conference. It would just be the premier G5 conference. It wouldn't make sense for those teams to do that financially. But today I want to look at, does it even make sense for the PAC to take that approach? So I'm going to pull up some graphics so that you can see it for yourself. And again, all this information was sourced from articles that are in the description. I've just put it all, I've sort of combined it all and put it in one place. Because here's what we know. Before I throw this first graphic up, here's what we know. We know that the PAC-2 war chest is what we call it, north of $220 million. $65 million of that is coming from the departing members, and I believe the rest of it is playoff and tournament units that are going to be distributed over the next 6 or 7 years, I think until 2030. So they have this, what we've now coined war chest of money. And the knee-jerk or natural assumption is that that's what's going to go towards rebuilding the conference. But I'm going to pull up some graphics here with some finances, and let's look at this, and you tell me if you think that's their best option. So, first graphic you see here, a PAC-2 rebuild cost. In the description of this video, I've also got the PDF of the court or the scheduling arrangement between the Mountain West Conference and the PAC-2 Conference, which is set for the next 2 years. Okay? Part of that agreement is withdrawal fees and termination fees that I've put here on the screen. Now, let me explain a couple things before you start jumping into the comments. I'm just using random teams over here. These numbers are not specifically attached to these teams. Okay, the way it's structured in the contract is that for every team that the PAC invites from the Mountain West, there's an increasing withdrawal fee. So this first couple columns over here, I just said, okay, I think I even just put them in alphabetical order, right? So if the first team that were to be invited was Boise, that's a $10 million withdrawal fee that the PAC conference owes to the Mountain West. Then the next team, say it were Colorado State, that's $10.5 more million. Then if the next team's Fresno State, it's at $11 more million. Then if it's San Diego State, it's $11.5 more million. If it's UNLV, it's 12. You could see Wyoming be 12.5. And as you continue to progress that amount to build your team, your conference back to 8 teams, which is what that Canzano tweet said, you're looking at $67.5 million that's going to cost you right off the bat. That exceeds the amount that you're getting from the departing members. Then, on top of that, there's termination fees. This is money that the departing team from the Mountain West owes their conference. So Boise would owe $5.5 million, Colorado State would owe $5.5 million, Fresno State would owe $5.5 million, and so on. That number gets up to $33 million. So who's to say if I'm Boise State, if I don't say, hey, look, you got to pay my termination fee if you want me to join this conference. So in theory, we could have one of two scenarios, which we're going to look at both. We could have a scenario where it's $67.5 million, or we could have a scenario where it's over $100 million, depending on who ends up paying this termination fee. Now, as far as the Mountain West is concerned, that termination fee is due from the school, and the withdrawal fee is due from the PAC, the PAC-2 conference. So let's look at this. Next slide here. So out of that $220 million, right, 65 coming from the departing members, as I already said. This 2-year scheduling agreement is already costing the PAC-2 $23 million. And again, that is in one of the articles. There's a source for that down in the description. I'm telling you, every single thing you're seeing on these graphics is sourced. So that's costing them $23 million. The PAC-2 rebuild is would cost in this scenario $67.5 million, because this would be as if those teams paid their own termination fees. So that's over $90 million coming out of the PAC-2 war chest, coming out of the PAC-2's pockets. leaving them with $129.5 million, down from what began at $220 million. So you're essentially looking at near half of what you have just to rebuild your conference with 6 new teams that won't even get you back to that Power 5 status. So is it worth dipping into your war chest just to build a premier G5 league? Now, a worst case scenario is, let's say these Mountain West teams say, hey, we'll come join this conference with you, but you've got to pay our $5.5 million termination fee. Well, let's look at what that would look like, right? If I'm a Boise State or a Colorado State or a Fresno State and I get that invite, I'm San Diego State, I know you got money. I know what you're sitting on. So you need to pay my $5.5 million termination. So if you were to combine not just the withdrawal fees that the PAC would already owe the Mountain West, but if they ended up having to take care of those termination fees as well, now you're looking at $123.5 million just to rebuild this conference with 6 teams, just to get yourself to 8. And that takes your money down to less than $100 million. So look at that. And again, the Pac-2 rebuild, that's just me adding in that additional $33 million in termination fees. And now you're really dipping into the money that you have. So let me pull this graphic down. So another option, and I'm going to pull this up from the article on the Nevada Sports Net, says this: another potential option would be Mountain West members voting to dissolve the conference, which would require a 3/4 vote or 9 of the 12 football playing members. At that point, those schools could join the Pac-12 without exit fees and potentially without withdrawal fees, depending upon how the contract below is interpreted. And I've also attached the contract between the Mountain West and the PAC down in the description. So if you need 9 teams to vote to dissolve the Mountain West to eliminate all of these fees, that means you're going to have to invite 3 more schools. At that point, though, wouldn't it make more sense to just reverse merge? I don't know. I think that voting to dissolve, man, I feel like that's probably the least likely option to happen. Because I feel like there's probably some more red tape around it if those teams from the Mountain West say, hey, if we're going to vote to dissolve, here's what we want in return for joining this new conference. Like if we're going to eliminate the current conference that we're in, that already has a media deal that's up for renegotiations here in a couple years, like you're going to need to provide some sort of financial incentive in order for us to make that decision. So for all we know, not that it would be the same amount as those numbers I just showed you, but they could demand X amount of money to cast their vote. Whereas the other option is, and I know for a lot of people this is the least desired option, but that is to just fully merge or reverse merge with the Mountain West under the Pac-2 umbrella. Because if you were to do that as Oregon State and Washington State, all that money I just showed you on those graphics that would be going out the door, you now keep that. And you're essentially splitting that $220 million war chest amongst 2 institutions. And so if you're just willing to be in a conference that has teams that are in the bottom tier of the Mountain West, you could keep all that additional financial resources and you could almost fund yourself like a Power 5 for at least a year or 2, I think, if my math is right, and likely be at the top of that Mountain West Conference. And I feel like that's your best option for that CFP access. Because that leads me to another question that I've been pondering here lately is this. Is a G5, like a premier group of 5 football conference, is that really advantageous for access to the college football playoff? Think about this for a second. There's no guarantee that you're going to be the highest ranked G5 conference champion for winning the premier G5 conference. And I think we don't have to look any further than Liberty a year ago. They had the worst strength of schedule in the country, ran the table, and got the playoff bid. If you have an elite premier sort of best of the rest group of 5 conference, those teams are going to beat each other up as the season wears on. We already kind of see that with the Mountain West right now. Top to bottom, they've probably got the best top to bottom conference of teams out of all the group of 5 conferences. And they always end up beating each other up as the season plays out. And the team that you think is going to be in the mix for that playoff, well, in the past, what would have been a New Year's Six bid, you end up with a conference champion like Boise State a season ago with 4 losses. A 4-loss conference champion at the G5 level, they're not going to get that bid over an undefeated Liberty or a 1-loss Memphis or whoever. So as I continue to think about this best of the rest group of 5 league, I don't know that if my team was, as a fan, I would love it personally, but I don't know that I'd want my team in that conference simply because winning that conference doesn't guarantee that I'm going to be the team that gets the playoff bid. So anyways, man, that's all I got today. Hopefully you appreciate the research. Feel free to rewind back, look at those graphics, look at those numbers. But what are your thoughts? I mean, what do you think? This is kind of just a continuation or a part 2 from Thursday's show. I wanted to bring some concrete research numbers. And look, these numbers, they're not like brand new released. I mean, a lot of this stuff came out earlier this year, earlier this spring. Some were at the top of the year. And you can go through all those articles that I have down in the descriptions and see all the sources and information for yourself. But ultimately, to me, if I'm Oregon State, Washington State at this point, if I'm not going to get a Power 5 or Power 4 invite, I'm looking at just splitting this money that we've got and let's just join this conference and let's fund ourselves to the maximum capacity for a couple of years. Let's become the elite premier teams in this conference. And then let's try to be the perennial playoff representative from the group of 5. Now, what do you do after a couple years once that money runs dry and you're no longer able to fund yourself that way? Well, that's where you have a whole nother conversation that we would have to have, right? Like what could the Mountain West with Oregon State and Washington State, command a $1 billion media deal similar to what the American has right now? But even that still wouldn't pay you even close to what you were making as a PAC conference, in the PAC conference, Pac-12. You could restructure how those payouts go, right? You could make them more top heavy, which is kind of what the American Conference has done. I'm assuming they'll probably do the same thing with the new commissioner, but that's sort of what they've done. They distributed their amounts based on in a lot of cases based on performance. I believe Cincinnati was pulling in somewhere in the 11 million range before they left, when they were having those good runs. I know kind of the average amount was around 7.5, 8 million, and then some of the lower teams were pulling in less. So, you'd have to get creative with how you structured that. But let me know your thoughts. Thank you for watching. That's it for me today. Trey Smith, College Underdogs.